Is Winchester's 175 grain 41 Magnum the ultimate winter EDC load? We're going to find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to LocaCarnivore, the hunting, guns, and adventure channel for smart people. And you're smart because you're watching us. Remember, you're going to want to stay through the entire video. We've got great information from one end to the other. And of course, we're going to have our humorous little zinger at the end. We know you'll like that. We wanted to find out if the Winchester 175 grain Silvertip loading for their 41 Magnum is a good winter carry EDC load. Why are we concerned about this? Well, quite frankly, if you live in a very cold climate during the winter, people wear very heavy clothes, extremely heavy clothes, multiple layers, and also according to basic rules of biology, people are just larger the farther north you go in latitude. So combine the fact that they're larger, bulkier bodied people with the fact they've got all these heavy clothes on, and we get a real challenge for the average self-defense handgun load, like from 9mm, 45, 40, anything like that. And we need that extra penetration to get through all that clothing and to make sure that we're delivering enough energy to stop a large human being who, if they're trying to do you harm, there's a statistically very good chance, in fact the federal government did a study, 80% chance that a violent felon is under the influence of some sort of mind-altering chemical. All of these drugs contribute to people that are more resistant to the effects of gunfire, at least initially, until they bleed out and physiology just takes over. So I've always been in a constant search to find the best EDC load for the winter. And one of my favorite cartridges is the 41 Magnum. In my opinion, it is, your mileage may vary, but in my opinion, it is perhaps the best revolver cartridge and maybe handgun cartridge in general ever developed. It can do so much. It's so versatile. And when it comes to the big bore magnums, this is, in my opinion, the most power that an average shooter can control reliably, especially when firing the gun with one hand. Remember, it's a hand gun, not a hands gun necessarily. And there's a lot of videos out there, tons, in gunfights where when it all starts happening, somebody just has the gun in one hand and they start shooting back because they're scared. The Winchester Silvertip is, according to Winchester, rated at 1,250 feet per second out of the muzzle. That's with a 175 grain bullet. They don't state what barrel length they use. I'm assuming it's in a 6-inch barrel. That's what most revolver cartridges are tested in typically, although a lot of the Magnums are tested in 8-inch barrels, like the 44 typically. But at any rate, 1,250 feet per second. No, we didn't chrono the load out of this short barrel. This is about a 3-inch gun. This is the gun we used for the test because, and you can go to my other video about why we don't chronograph our gel tests. We're not interested in how the cartridge does numerically. What we're interested in is how it does when it hits the target medium, how it does when it hits the gel. So if it's going slow or fast, that's an irrelevant question. All it counts is what does it do when it hits the gel. Don't forget to give us a big like on this video, subscribe, ring that little bell so you'll get notified of all our future videos. We'd love to have you. Thank you. Before we really get into the depth of this video, it's necessary, I think, to give you a quick historical overview, a little background on the 41 Magnum. The 41 Magnum was introduced in 1963. It was the brainchild of cartridge and ballistics guru Elmer Keith. And for those of you who don't know about Elmer Keith, Google it, maybe you can figure it out. But for those of you who don't know about Elmer Keith, he was a fantastic tinkerer. He loved ballistics and he developed a lot of cartridges. 338 Winchester Magnum for one, 44 Remington Magnum for another. By 1962 or 63, Keith felt that there was still room for a cartridge that wasn't quite as brutal to shoot as the 44 Magnum, but still provided more power than the 357 Magnum. And he saw it as a dual purpose thing where you could hunt with it and use it for self-defense. And he wanted two different power levels. He wanted a 210 grain bullet at about 1300 to 1400 feet per second. And that would give you a muzzle energy right in the high 800s, bordering on 900. Very equivalent to the 44 Magnum. And then for that law enforcement load, he envisioned a 200 grain bullet at 900 feet per second. That sounds suspiciously like a light 45 ACP to me, and so basically he was trying to duplicate that, I think. Fast forward to when the cartridge was finally released, after Keith had worked with Remington, and he had worked trying to get Remington to make those two different loads at those velocity, in that velocity envelope, but Remington, in their infinite wisdom, had different ideas. It came out from the factory at a rated 210 grain bullet at 1,500 feet per second. That's 1,049 foot-pounds. Off the chart. Now their law enforcement or detuned load was still with that 210 grain bullet, but at 1,150 feet per second, which is right, just shy of 700 foot-pounds. It's right about the 690, 680 range. So it's definitely, it gives you a wallop either way. Hey, let's share this video. Please share it with everybody you know, even the people you don't know, to help this channel grow. We'd appreciate your help on that. So what do you think about what we're saying in this video about the 41 Magnum or the Winchester Silvertip? Go down in the comments there. Let us know what you think. The more input we get from you, the better we can make our future videos. And then when the Dirty Harry films, remember that, came back out in 1970, everybody saw Clint Eastwood with that big 44 blowing away suspects and miscreants left and right. They just had to have one, and the 41 at that point was basically on life support. And it has been ever since. There's still ammunition produced by the mainline companies, and there might be some boutique rounds out there that are oriented to self-defense. Most companies produce at least just the basic 210 grain load, but it's even then is watered down a little bit, probably about 1,400 feet per second is pretty typical. Remember, the LocaCarnivore project gets no support at the moment. We have no advertisers, no affiliates, nothing like that. So we need your help to make us grow and to allow us to bring you more and better videos. Go down to the link in the description there for our Patreon and go on over and give us some love there. We'd appreciate it. Every dollar that you give us helps us make more and better videos for you. So the 41 Magnum is an excellent cartridge, and this 175 grain Winchester Silvertip is probably the best self-defense oriented load out there. So we decided to test this 175 grain Winchester Silvertip, and our test gun for the day was my Model 57 with the roughly 3-inch barrel, custom Model 57. So we're testing this 175 grain Silvertip against our Frost Giant Extreme Gel Test fixture. And just a quick overview of that, what that is designed to do is to duplicate what a bullet has to deal with when a cross-torso shot, against super heavy winter clothing. So what we did was we made a multi-layer package of fabrics and insulation that stimulates the outside of the sleeve, and then you have to go through the arm, and then the inside of the sleeve, and then the clothing that's on the torso. So you have 3 layers of clothing, not just the one on a frontal, but 3 layers of clothing you have to go through. So our Frost Giant is designed to duplicate that type of scenario. If you'd like more content, please go to the LocaCarnivore website. The link's down in the description there. We've got lots of great stuff for you to read and other videos to see. On top of that, there's a link there, right there. You can go to our LocaCarnivore store and, of course, buy LocaCarnivore branded merchandise to help support the channel. We'd certainly appreciate your assistance in that area, too. Good hit. All the way to the end of the block almost. Similar wound track, initial expansion to the 10mm Silvertip. You get a secondary temporary cavity in the torso block and almost full penetration of the block. Alright, I brought you, that light outside wasn't very good, so I brought the blocks into our laboratory here at our clandestine Alpine test facilities located at the sprawling LocaCarnivore headquarters complex, and I wanted to show you hopefully a better view of these bullet tracks. So here is the 175 grain Winchester Silvertip out of the
.41 Magnum, and you can see that after it entered about 1.5 inches or so, 1 3/4 inches, another temporary cavity started, which went a little over 2 inches. I've got the measurements, I'll show them to you later. And you can see, hopefully there, that it then settled into just a caliber wound and stopped.
Okay, we're going to look at temporary cavities from the top. Right there, 175 grain. Cannot see the screen in this light. Winchester Silvertip, and the Silvertips have this weird figure 8 sort of double lobed temporary stretch cavity.
Alright, here's our .41 Magnum, 175 grain Winchester Silvertip that we recovered from the gel. It expanded well the way it was designed to do. I think it lost quite a bit of mass. We'd have to weigh this bullet, but I think it left a lot of the core in the wound track. As you can see, it peeled back substantially. I think the reason we got as much penetration out of it as we did is that even though it peeled back almost to the base of the hollow point cavity, the overall mass, the wash off of the core as it went through the media, reduced the surface area. There, you can see that better. But still, it made such a tremendous wound track, along with that secondary temporary cavity in the torso, that it's a fantastic round. It's just got so much energy, and then actually it aided the penetration, which is what we need in this scenario, by not peeling back dramatically, too badly.
So how'd you like that results on that test? As you can see, the Winchester Silvertip is a stellar load, in my opinion, for winter everyday carry. And that's because it gives excellent penetration without getting too far afield. And it's not easily defeated by multiple layers of clothing. Despite the fact it's an old technology, hollow point, I mean, the Silvertip came out originally, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s, roughly around in there. And so it's very old technology, but it still works quite well in the .41 Magnum. And that's because it's going at a sufficient enough velocity and it has enough mass that it will go right through that clothing. And as you saw, it did expand. It didn't clog up like a lot of the old school hollow points do when they even meet even a t-shirt or something like that. So with all that clothing, the 3 packages of clothing, it still didn't get all loaded up, and it did expand. Albeit the expansion was in the moderate category. It wasn't quite as much as you might expect. It wasn't as much as we've seen, say, in the .357 Magnum Silvertip. But that was actually a good thing, because the more expansion you get, the increase in the frontal area, that creates drag and slows that bullet down very quickly, and that reduces your penetration. So you have to balance the expansion from the penetration. As we saw with the 175 grain Silvertip and .41 Magnum, it gave sufficient expansion initially to produce a very good temporary wound cavity and a very good wound track, and it also went on to produce a second temporary cavity once it got into the torso block, which is very unusual. We haven't had any, well, with one exception, and I won't go into it right now, that'll be a spoiler, but we haven't had any other cartridges once they clear those other 2 packs that would be between your arm and, in your underarm area. We haven't had any that then continue to either expand or continue to dump energy. You just get a caliber diameter wound. And that's why we like the larger calibers for winter carry, because it's that last penetration into the torso block that's going to count. That's what's going to incapacitate your assailant. So you do need that penetration in there, and the .41 Magnum does that. On top of that, we use larger calibers because since usually you don't get that extra dynamic energy transfer once it gets into the torso block, you need that larger caliber to provide sufficient wounding. So things like 45, 10 millimeter, 41, 44, I prefer the special over the Magnum, but any of these larger bore diameters are going to provide that wider wound track, albeit not huge amounts more than like a 9 millimeter or 38 caliber bullet, but it is larger, and larger is larger. So we give the 175 grain Winchester 41 Magnum Silvertip an excellent rating as far as a winter EDC load. And we think that it would also perform marvelously under other circumstances as well. And since the penetration is not off the chart, you could use it even in the summertime. It's particularly well suited against large statured assailants who are wearing heavy, thick, multiple layers of winter clothing. We hope you got some value out of this video, learned a few things, and we want to thank you for taking your valuable time to watch us here at LocaCarnivore once again. As always, stay aware, stay safe, please be kind to people, and we'll see you next time on LocaCarnivore.